My sister dated my boyfriend before me. Then she tried to ruin my wedding proposal, but her final move exposed everything. My name is Nora, and everything went off the rails because my boyfriend and my younger sister had once dated for a shorter time than most people keep leftovers sitting in their refrigerator. You'd think that's the kind of information someone should know before a relationship starts getting serious, wouldn't you? Trust me, I couldn't agree more. The problem was that neither of us had any idea. I had just moved back to the city after spending 3 years in a small town, chasing a relationship that crashed and burned in spectacular fashion. After everything that happened, hearing someone say, "fresh start," was enough to make me want to throw the nearest object across the room. I came home with 2 suitcases, a savings account that had seen better days, and enough embarrassment that I avoided almost every family gathering for the first few months. My parents treated my return like it proved they'd been right about everything from the beginning, which drove me crazy. But I needed a place to stay until I got back on my feet. So I smiled, bit my tongue, and let it go. After a while, I landed a receptionist position at a small outpatient clinic. Oh, it wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. My days were spent answering phones, checking patients in, and repeatedly explaining that showing up an hour late didn't mean the doctor had personally wronged them. Honestly, after the disaster I'd just escaped, dealing with predictable complaints felt strangely comforting. Every morning before work, I stopped by the same little coffee shop next to the bus stop. That's exactly how I met my boyfriend. He worked in building maintenance for an office complex a few blocks away, and every morning he'd be there in worn work boots, holding the same plain cup of coffee like it was the only reason he made it through the day. The first conversation happened because the bus was running late again, and he joked that the schedule must have been designed by somebody who hated people with jobs. I laughed a lot harder than the joke deserved, and he noticed. After that, we kept seeing each other almost every morning. At first, it was just small talk. The overcrowded bus, a show we both happened to watch, a bakery display full of pastries neither of us could justify buying before payday. Eventually, he started saving me a seat whenever the coffee shop got crowded. And if I arrived first, I'd order his usual drink before he even walked in. About 6 weeks later, he asked if I wanted to grab dinner with him. I said yes, then immediately walked into the clinic bathroom and stared at my reflection like I'd just agreed to negotiate with kidnappers. Being with him felt comfortable in a way I wasn't sure I could trust. When I got quiet, he never pressured me to explain myself. If something broke in my apartment, he'd quietly fix it without acting like I owed him endless gratitude afterward. Of course, he wasn't perfect. He could be unbelievably stubborn whenever he thought he was being practical. And whenever arguments got too emotional, he shut down completely. He also had this habit of saying, "I'm fine," while wearing the exact expression of a man seriously considering disappearing into the woods forever. Even with those flaws, he was kind, dependable, and refreshingly normal. By that point in my life, normal was probably the most attractive quality anyone could have. I told him I had sisters, but I never went into much detail about them. My older sister and I had always been close, and my other sister usually stayed quiet and avoided family drama whenever she could. My younger sister, though, had always been a different story. My mom called her sensitive. My older sister called her dramatic. And on the days when I was being honest with myself, I usually called her exhausting. At one point, he mentioned that before meeting me, he'd briefly dated someone from a dating app. According to him, it lasted less than 3 months, never became serious, and ended because he didn't feel the connection he was looking for. I never asked to see pictures, and he never offered any. Adults have histories, and I was doing my best to act like a mature person who understood that. The only thing he mentioned was her first name, but it was common enough that it meant absolutely nothing to me. Besides, my younger sister used our mother's last name in everyday life, while I used our father's. An old story from a temporary separation when we were teenagers that nobody ever bothered to sort out on paper. At the time, none of it seemed important. We had been together for almost a year and a half when I finally decided to bring him to Thanksgiving dinner with my family. Looking back, I wish I could go back in time and gently grab my past self by the shoulders. He had to spend part of the holiday at work because a pipe had burst in one of his buildings, so he told me he'd be arriving late. I got to my parents' house by myself, carrying a dessert I'd bought from a bakery but transferred into one of my own serving dishes because I wanted everyone to think I'd made it. My older sister was already there with her husband. My quiet sister was setting the table, and my younger sister was stretched out on the couch, complaining that the house was too warm while scrolling through her phone. My mom asked if I had pictures of my boyfriend, so I handed her my phone without a second thought. She flipped through a few photos, smiled with approval, then passed it to my dad. Before long, it was making its way around the room like a family keepsake. My younger sister barely paid attention until my quiet sister held the phone out toward her. The second she looked at the screen, everything about her expression changed. All the color drained from her face, her jaw tightened, and she stared at me like I'd walked into the house wearing her identity. "Come with me," she said. It wasn't a request. She grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward the kitchen. I yanked my arm back because I've always hated being dragged anywhere, especially by family. "What's wrong with you?" I asked. Her voice was shaking with anger. "That's him." I stared at her, confused. "That's who?" "The guy I dated." For a second, my brain refused to accept it. I actually glanced back toward the living room, like there might be another man in the picture. "What guy?" She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "The guy who dumped me. The one I told Mom about." That last part mattered. She'd told our mother, not me, though she clearly didn't think there was a difference. I asked how long they'd been together. "Close to 3 months," she said. I asked if it had been serious. "That's not the point," she snapped. I asked if they were still talking. "He ended things and disappeared," she said. "Disappeared?" I repeated. "Or did he stop contacting you after breaking up with you?" She looked 2 seconds from slapping me. "You always do this." "Do what?" "You make everything sound reasonable so you can act like nobody else's feelings matter." That wasn't fair. And because it wasn't fair, it hit exactly where she knew it would. Before I could respond, the front door opened. My boyfriend walked in carrying a bottle of wine, apologizing for being late, completely unaware he'd just stepped into a room where one of his old relationships was sitting a few feet from the mashed potatoes. Then he noticed my younger sister. He froze, maybe a second, but I saw it. His eyes moved from her to me, and he said my name carefully. Heat rushed through my chest. "She told me," I said. The room went dead silent. My dad was still holding my phone. My older sister's husband suddenly became fascinated by a basket of rolls. My boyfriend set the wine down. "I didn't know you were sisters," he said. My younger sister let out a short, bitter laugh. "Of course you didn't." He looked back at me. "Do you want me to leave?" That question probably saved him. If he'd gotten defensive or acted annoyed, the night could have gone very differently. Instead, he looked genuinely sick over it. I told him to stay, partly because I believed he hadn't known, and partly because my sister was watching me like she expected me to surrender something. That second reason wasn't admirable, but it was true. Dinner was one of the most uncomfortable meals I've ever sat through. My mom forced cheerful conversation that only made things worse. My dad talked too loudly about work. My sister barely touched her food, and my boyfriend answered every question politely while looking like he'd rather repair a sewer line with his bare hands. Later that evening, I pulled him into the hallway near the laundry room. "Who ended it?" I asked. "I did," he said without hesitation. "Why?" "It wasn't going anywhere. She wanted something more serious, and I didn't." "Were you still talking when you met me?" "No." "Did you know her last name?" "The one she used." "Not yours." "Did she ever show you pictures of us?" He shook his head. "Not that I remember." Nora, I swear, I had no idea, and I believed him. I hated how quickly I believed him. Part of me wondered if that made me a bad sister, but I couldn't ignore my instincts. My mom overheard enough of that conversation to corner me later while I was packing leftovers. "She's always taken rejection harder than other people," she said. "You need to think about how this affects her." Oh, I stared at her. How does me dating someone months after they broke up become something I did to her? "That's not what I said." "It's exactly what you meant." My mom sighed like she was already tired of the fight. "You're the mature one. I'm asking you to act like it." That sentence should have been my warning. It was practically our family's unofficial motto. Be mature, be understanding, set the example, which in our house always translated to the same thing. Give your younger sister whatever she wants, and don't make your mother uncomfortable by pushing back. After Thanksgiving, my younger sister basically stopped speaking to me. She skipped my birthday dinner, ignored every message in the family group chat, and once left my parents' house less than 20 minutes after I arrived. My mom treated it as proof my sister had been deeply wounded. My older sister called it emotional blackmail. I tried not to label it, still naively hoping it would burn itself out. Meanwhile, my relationship kept moving forward. He met my friends, I met his family, and when my rent went up, we signed a lease together. Our very first week living together, we had the dumbest argument imaginable over where to store the cleaning supplies. It lasted almost an hour before we both started laughing because neither of us actually cared. That was the kind of conflict I understood. Two tired people annoying each other, then laughing about it. The family conflict was different. Nothing ever got resolved. It just sat there, waiting for the next chance to explode. Several months later, my boyfriend organized a dinner with both our families, telling me it was to celebrate a promotion at work. I believed him because apparently I'm incredibly easy to distract with pasta. To my surprise, my younger sister showed up, sat beside my mom, and acted almost pleasant through the appetizers. I actually thought maybe enough time had passed. That thought now feels embarrassingly optimistic. After dinner, my boyfriend stood up. His hands were shaking, and I assumed nerves about the promotion speech. Instead, he walked around the table, knelt beside my chair, and opened a ring box. I covered my mouth in shock. His mom burst into tears. My older sister made an excited sound like she'd been waiting for this longer than I had. And then my younger sister shot to her feet so fast, her chair scraped across the floor. "Are you serious?" she demanded. The room went silent. My boyfriend was still kneeling, ring box open, while I looked between them, completely lost. She pointed at him. "After everything, you're doing this in front of me?" My face burned. "Sit down," I told her. "No, this is humiliating." "For who?" my older sister asked. My younger sister looked straight at me. "You knew how I felt. And you knew this dinner was never about you," I said. That was when she completely fell apart, crying loudly and angrily, always the fastest way to make my mother rush to her side. My mom stood up, but my older sister got there first, took our sister by the arm, and walked her out. "I'm not a child," I heard my sister snap outside. "Then stop acting like one," my older sister answered. They left the room, leaving everyone else staring at me. I wish I could say I focused on the man beside me holding a ring, but I didn't. I just stood there shaking with anger and embarrassment. My boyfriend slowly got up. His mom quietly asked if everything was okay and whether there was something about the situation her son hadn't told her. She wasn't accusing me, which somehow made it worse. I asked him to step outside, and we walked around the far side of the building so we wouldn't run into my sister. In the parking lot, he put the ring box back in his pocket. "I'm so sorry," I said. "You didn't do this," he answered, looking exhausted. Then he took both my hands. "Nora, I need you to answer something honestly. After everything that just happened, do you still want to marry me?" It wasn't the proposal either of us had imagined. No applause, no photographer, just a dumpster and a delivery truck beeping somewhere behind us. "Yes," I said. "I absolutely do." He let out a breath like he'd been holding it for months, then slid the ring onto my finger. I cried almost immediately. He got emotional too, though he denied it later. We kissed in a parking lot that smelled faintly like old onions, and somehow that felt more real than anything that could have happened inside. My younger sister never apologized. For weeks, she skipped every gathering she could avoid. My mom kept insisting she just needed time. My dad, as usual, contributed nothing because silence was always his favorite way of dealing with conflict. About 10 weeks later, I got a message from her. She said she'd ruined the proposal and wanted to apologize in person, and invited us to dinner at her apartment. My boyfriend's answer was an immediate no. My older sister thought we should go. "She owes you an apology, and if this isn't settled before the wedding, Mom will spend your whole engagement making it your problem." She turned out to be right, although going didn't stop it anyway. I told my boyfriend I wanted to give my sister one shot. When we arrived, I realized she'd also invited my parents and my older sister. She wanted to apologize in front of everyone so nobody could later claim she'd said something different. My quiet sister refused to come. At first, everything felt suspiciously normal. She'd cleaned the apartment, cooked dinner, even bought my favorite dessert. She asked about the venue, complimented my ring without touching it. I kept waiting for the apology. It never came during dinner. After dessert, she set her fork down. "I've been thinking a lot about what you told me," she said to my boyfriend. "What did I tell you? That you didn't think we were ever going to become serious." "I said that when we broke up. But with her, you knew." "No, I got to know her." She laughed quietly. "Right. So what exactly does she have that I didn't?" Every muscle in my body tightened. "This isn't an apology," I said. She ignored me, staring at him. "If I offered you everything she's offering you now, would you still choose her?" He pushed his chair back. "I'm not answering that." "Why not?" "Because this is completely inappropriate." She stood up, and instead of leaving, she reached into her sweater pocket and pulled out a small ring. It took my brain a moment to catch up. She walked around the table, knelt in front of him. "Then choose," she said, holding the ring out. My boyfriend jumped up so fast his chair slammed into the wall. "Get up. Just answer me." "No." Just flat, immediate, final. She flinched anyway. I walked around the table, barely thinking, and told her to get off the floor. She looked up. "What's the matter? And scared he'll hesitate?" Before I could stop myself, I shoved her shoulder. Not hard, but she was already kneeling and off balance, and she tipped sideways into the couch. The room exploded. My mom screamed my name. My dad shot up. My older sister swore. My boyfriend grabbed my arm and pulled me back. The instant I saw my sister on the floor, I knew I'd crossed a line. But I still wanted to scream at her, which isn't exactly my proudest moment. "I'm sorry I pushed you," I said, breathing hard. "But what is wrong with you?" My mom rushed to my sister like I'd thrown her down a flight of stairs. My dad started toward us, then stopped halfway, torn between his wife and me. In the end, he followed my boyfriend and me into the hallway while my mother stayed with my sister. That split said more about our family than anything anyone shouted that night. On the drive home, my boyfriend was mostly silent. "You can't put your hands on her," he finally said. "I know. She was out of line. I know. But you still can't do that." I snapped the last "I know" at him and started crying, hating that he was right, and hating even more that being right didn't make me feel less betrayed. A few days later, my older sister arranged for all of us to meet at her apartment, promising to referee so nobody threw furniture or proposed marriage to someone who didn't want it. I apologized first. "I shouldn't have pushed you. I was angry, but that doesn't excuse it." My sister gave one short nod. No apology back. "Your turn," my older sister told her. My younger sister stared at the floor. I didn't really think he'd say yes. I just wanted to see if he'd hesitate. "Wow," I said. "That makes me feel so much better." My boyfriend leaned forward. "Why?" This time the tears in her eyes weren't performance. "Because when we were together, you said you weren't looking for anything serious. Then a few months later, you got serious with her. You moved in together. You proposed. It made me feel like I was only good enough to pass the time with, while she was the one worth choosing. For the first time, I understood part of what had been driving her. It didn't excuse anything, but it made her human instead of just unreasonable." My boyfriend answered carefully, "I didn't date Nora to hurt you. I didn't even know you were sisters. What happened between us was brief, and ending it didn't give either of us permanent rights to the other person's life." She wiped her face. "I know that logically. I just don't feel it emotionally." I asked what she wanted now. "I don't think I should come to the wedding," she said. It wasn't the answer I expected. "Is that what you want?" "Yes, I don't trust myself to sit there and act normal." It hurt, but it was honest. "Okay," I said. After that, my mother started acting like I'd personally banned my younger sister from the wedding. The whole issue finally exploded in public during my quiet sister's birthday dinner. She'd picked a casual little restaurant and made exactly one request beforehand. No fighting. Honestly, that probably tells you everything you need to know about birthdays in my family. For most of the meal, everyone actually managed to behave. My younger sister wasn't there, claiming she had a headache. Personally, I suspected the headache was me, but I kept that thought to myself. My mom asked about the flowers, my older sister chatted about bridesmaid dresses, and my dad became completely absorbed in figuring out how many people could fit at each table, even though nobody had asked him. Then my mom casually said, "I assume your sister's formal invitation is going out with everyone else's." I set my glass down. "No." The table went silent. The table went, "What do you mean, no?" She already decided she's not coming. She was upset when she said that. "No," she said it calmly, and I accepted it. "You just accepted it?" What was I supposed to do? Drag her down the aisle? My quiet sister whispered, "Please." I lowered my voice. My mother didn't. "You're the older one. You're getting married. You have everything you wanted. You could show a little grace." There it was again. The mature one, the fortunate one, the daughter whose pain was always somehow easier to justify. She got down on one knee and proposed to my fiancé in front of me, I said. She was emotional. So was I. Funny how that didn't seem to impress you. Her face hardened. "You pushed her." And I apologized. An apology doesn't erase it. My older sister kicked me under the table, but I was already too angry to take the hint. Then my quiet sister put both hands flat on the table. "Can we please not turn my birthday into another meeting about her?" Everyone stopped. She almost never raised her voice. "I love you and I support you, but I'm asking all of you to stop right now." I apologized to her. My dad changed the subject and dinner limped toward dessert. I went home feeling like I'd ruined someone else's birthday. Even though I hadn't started the argument, another family specialty. My mother lights the match, and somehow I get blamed for the smoke. Over the next several days, she called constantly, insisting family should come before misunderstandings, calling the whole proposal incident a misunderstanding, as if my sister had accidentally ended up on one knee while tying her shoe. She worried about gossip if my sister missed the wedding. I suggested she just ask my sister directly whether she wanted to come. She never did. She just kept calling me instead. Soon, extended relatives were weighing in. Aunts I heard from twice a year sent messages about forgiveness. A cousin told me my mother was heartbroken. Several relatives said they wouldn't come if my sister was excluded. I corrected them at first. She'd chosen not to attend, but nobody cared. The story had already been rewritten into something easier to judge. Most of my dad's side supported me. My older and quiet sisters confirmed they were coming. My boyfriend's family stayed out of it, though I could tell his mother was worried the ceremony would turn into another public disaster. Then the guest list shrank enough to create a financial problem. We'd booked a medium-sized venue with a required minimum number of guests, and with so many people backing out, keeping it no longer made financial sense. Canceling meant losing part of our deposit, money we'd planned to keep for emergencies and for those first few months of married life, but it still cost less than paying the venue's full contracted minimum with a shrinking guest list. One evening, my boyfriend sat with our budget open and said, "I think we should consider postponing." What I heard was, "I don't want to marry you anymore." That's not remotely what he said, but I was exhausted and terrified my family had finally worn him down. You want to postpone because of them? I want to postpone because we're about to lose money we can't easily replace. So they win. This isn't about winning. It feels like it is. He rubbed his eyes. Nora, moving forward exactly as planned when the numbers don't work isn't brave, or it's irresponsible. That word landed hard. It sounded exactly like my mother. I knew this would happen, I muttered. What would happen? That you'd decide my family is too much. Your family is too much. That doesn't mean you are. We argued for the next 4 days, restarting the same fight every time one of us sighed wrong. On the third night, he spread every account statement across the table. No more arguing in circles. Just look. So I did. The lost deposit, the moving costs, his unpaid medical bill, my student loan, what we'd actually have left. "I want to marry you," he said. "I don't care if it happens in that venue or somebody's backyard. I care about not starting our marriage pretending money doesn't matter." I felt embarrassed. "I thought you were backing away." "I'm trying to stand beside you without both of us walking off a financial cliff." We agreed not to postpone. Instead, we'd find a smaller venue, absorb the loss, and stop making decisions based on who might get offended. Around the same time, the clinic announced a new location opening a few hours away and asked if anyone wanted to transfer. I glanced at the notice, decided moving sounded dramatic and unnecessary, but took a picture of it anyway. I called my younger sister one more time to be sure about the wedding. "Yes," she said, sounding tired. "I'm not asking you to change anything. Mom keeps saying you are. Mom says a lot of things. Have you told her that?" A humorless laugh. "She doesn't listen when the answer isn't the one she wants." That sentence explained my mother better than almost anything ever had. She proved it a few days later. One afternoon, she came to our house, assuming we'd both be at work. What she didn't know was that my boyfriend had taken a half day for an appointment that ended up getting canceled, so he was home when she knocked. She told him she wanted to speak with him privately. He let her stand in the entryway but refused to have any conversation about me unless I was there too. She claimed she was only trying to stop a family tragedy. He calmly told her a wedding invitation wasn't a tragedy. Then she said he had more common sense than I did and should convince me to invite my sister. He looked her in the eye and repeated again that my sister had made the decision not to come herself. "That's just what Nora claims," my mother said. And that was the moment his patience finally ran out. He told her it was time to leave. Instead of going, she accused him of controlling me, insisted I'd changed since meeting him, and said I'd never been this cruel to family before. He opened the front door and politely asked her to leave again. She kept talking. Finally, he stepped outside, repeated that the conversation was over, then went back inside and closed the door behind him. My mother stayed on the porch for several more minutes, speaking loudly enough that half the neighborhood could probably hear her, before she finally drove away. When he called me, I could hear both anger and exhaustion. "I don't want anything to do with any of them anymore." "Any of them? Your family. My older sister didn't do this. Neither did my quiet sister. I don't care. I'm done." That was the wrong thing to say to me. I told him he didn't get to erase the people who'd stood by me because he was furious at my mother. He said he was tired of wondering who'd show up next as her messenger. We were 2 sentences from starting another 4-day fight when he suddenly stopped, took a breath and said, "You're right. I'm angry, and I'm putting all of them in the same category." That mattered. He could admit his anger was making him unfair. In my family, that level of self-awareness felt supernatural. I called my mother and told her never to approach him behind my back again. I was only trying to help. "You came to our house because you thought I wouldn't be there." "I didn't know his schedule." "But you knew mine." Silence. "If you ever contact him privately again, I'm done responding to you." Her voice went cold. "So this is where we are now." "No, this is where you brought us." After that, I stopped replying to her daily messages. The silence felt peaceful, then strange. I kept checking my phone, feeling guilty if nothing came and angry if something did, like my nervous system had been trained to wait for her. A few days later, my dad called to say he was clearing out the garage and wanted all 4 daughters to come collect anything we'd left behind over the years. To avoid another confrontation, my older sister offered to pick up my boxes herself and bring them to her apartment. While we were sorting through everything, we found an old photo of a car. Nothing special, just a faded, beat-up, used car, but seeing it brought everything back. As a teenager, I'd worked evenings and weekends to help pay for it because my parents promised it would be mine to use for work and community college. Then my younger sister got her license, and suddenly everyone decided she needed it more than I did. My mother told me to share because I was the responsible one and could plan my schedule around the bus. Somehow that turned into my sister driving it every single day while I kept working to help pay the insurance. Then my older sister opened an old school folder and found a handwritten note from my mother, written when I was 14 after my younger sister got into trouble at school for provoking another student. Instead of addressing that directly, the note told me I needed to set the example and help keep the peace at home. My older sister sat down beside me on the floor. Do you remember when I wanted us to go to family therapy? I did. A few sessions years earlier, where my mother spent most of the time trying to convince the therapist I should just move back home, redirecting every mention of favoritism toward my anger instead. She never seemed interested in understanding the actual problem. I wanted a professional to convince you that you didn't always have to be the one who cooperated, my older sister said. I looked at the old note and felt foolish for ever being surprised by anything happening now. She's still asking me to do the same thing, only the excuse has changed. For years, I told myself my father was different because he was quieter. He hugged me after fights, apologized privately for my mother's tone. It took me a long time to realize his discomfort was never the same thing as actually taking my side. About a week later, my mother crossed another line when she went looking for my boyfriend at his job. She'd gotten his work address from my dad after telling him she only wanted to mail an apology, and because he still believed every problem could be solved if people just spoke a little more gently, he gave it to her without thinking twice. Instead of sending a letter, she waited in the parking lot until the end of his shift. The moment he spotted her standing beside his car, he immediately turned around and started heading back toward the building. She called his name and hurried after him. He calmly told her he wasn't willing to have any conversation without me there. She demanded to know why he was keeping me away from my sister. I'm not doing this, he said. She stepped directly into his path. He walked around her. Then she grabbed his arm. It wasn't some dramatic movie scene. It was something much more ordinary. A furious woman gripping someone's arm hard enough to stop him from walking away. But ordinary aggression can still cross a line. He pulled his arm back and told her to let go. Instead, she tightened her grip and told him he was going to listen to her. A security guard noticed the argument and walked over, and by the time he separated them, my boyfriend had a scratch on his arm and several coworkers were watching everything unfold through the lobby windows. My mother was ordered to leave the property immediately, and the company documented the incident and warned her she wasn't allowed to come back. When he called me afterward, his voice had that flat, controlled tone he always used when he was more upset than he wanted to admit. Physically, he was fine. The scratch wasn't serious, no medical treatment needed, but what bothered him most was the humiliation of explaining to his supervisor why his future mother-in-law had shown up and grabbed him in a parking lot. I drove straight to meet him after his shift. He climbed into the passenger seat while I quietly stared at the red mark still visible on his arm. I'm so sorry, I whispered. I need this to stop, he said. I know. He slowly shook his head. No, I mean completely. Not less often. Not after the wedding. I need it to stop. I knew he was right, even though I felt cornered, which wasn't fair since he was the one my mother had literally cornered. That night, I filled out the transfer application. I didn't tell anyone except him. It didn't mean we'd move, but for the first time, it felt like we had a way out. Then I called my father, expecting one sentence saying my mother had gone too far. Instead, after I explained everything, he sighed and asked, "What can you do to calm your mother down?" I thought I'd misheard him. What can I do? She grabbed my fiancé at his job. I know, she shouldn't have done that. For a second, I felt relieved. Then, but if you could let this go and find a way to include your sister, maybe she'd stop reacting like this. I closed my eyes. There are moments when a relationship changes without anyone raising their voice. You just lose the ability to keep pretending. I finally understood. My father had never been stuck between us. He'd chosen his side years ago, and his side was whichever option kept my mother's anger pointed away from him. She assaulted my fiancé at work, I said. Using that word will only make things worse. The thing she did made things worse. People are already talking. This is becoming public. It became public the second she showed up in his parking lot. He kept telling me to think about the consequences. Always her consequences, never anyone else's. I remembered the car, the note, the therapy sessions where nothing changed, every private apology he whispered after refusing to stand up for me in public. You never actually protect me, I told him. That's not fair. No, you comfort me after she hurts me, and then you ask me to make it easier for her to do it again. He went quiet. I waited for him to argue. He didn't. She's your mother, he finally said, and I'm your daughter. I replied. We hung up without resolving anything. A few days later, I called both of my parents, standing alone in our bedroom with the door closed and my notes in front of me because I knew my mother would interrupt until I lost my train of thought. I told her I was taking an indefinite break from contact. No calls, no visits, no messages through relatives, no contacting my boyfriend. I told my father I'd keep limited contact only if he stopped acting as her spokesperson. My mother started crying, said she'd sacrificed everything for me, that I was punishing her for caring too much, and then the sadness turned to anger, and she accused my boyfriend of isolating me. I kept reading from my notes as my voice shook. This is my decision. You came to my house after I set a boundary. Then you went to his workplace and put your hands on him. I'm not arguing about whether that was acceptable because it wasn't. My father asked if we could all just take a week to cool down. No, I said. We've been taking years? The call ended with my mother crying and my father telling me I'd regret this. It did scare me. I ended the call anyway. My boyfriend and I sent one message to the relatives still invited. The venue had changed and only guests who received direct confirmation would get the new location. We didn't explain every argument or try to convince anyone we were right. Once it was sent, I turned my phone off and sat on the bathroom floor crying, relief and grief at the exact same time. The decision felt clear, but clarity didn't create the mother I'd always wanted. Some relatives reached out with support. A few admitted they'd never known the full story. One aunt sent a long message about how short life is, which is apparently what people say when they want you to tolerate behavior they'd never accept from a stranger. Then my younger sister did something I didn't expect. She wrote in the family group chat that her decision not to attend the wedding had always been hers, told everyone to stop using her name to justify a boycott, and said our mother had crossed a line at my boyfriend's workplace and had no right to claim she was protecting her. My mother fired back several angry messages. My sister replied only once. You weren't defending me. You were using me. That ended the public argument. A few days later, she asked to meet me outside my building. Curiosity won out over my better judgment, and I found her waiting with her hands shoved in her coat pockets. I should have said something sooner, she said. I waited. I let Mom speak for me because part of me liked that she was angry at you. I was still jealous, but I never asked her to go after him, and I never wanted everyone to skip your wedding. Then why didn't you stop her? Because stopping her would mean admitting I was wrong too. It was probably the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. She wasn't asking for instant forgiveness. She admitted she'd turned rejection into competition, and our mother had used that competition the way she always used our differences. I gave her the excuse, she said. She didn't need one, I replied. No, but I gave her a convenient one. I thanked her for finally saying it out loud. It felt strange thanking someone for helping stop a disaster she'd also helped create. But taking responsibility still matters. Even late. We parted without hugging. No dramatic reconciliation. Just two people acknowledging something had changed. The wedding happened in a simple event room owned by my husband's aunt. We borrowed decorations, cut the guest list again, and chose a local caterer instead of the formal dinner we'd originally planned. I'd spent months grieving the bigger wedding, but on the actual day, the smaller room felt like a safe place instead of a compromise. My father came alone. Before the ceremony, he told me my mother had written me a letter. She asked me to bring it. I told her I'd ask if you wanted it first. The first time he'd respected a boundary before crossing it. I don't want it. Okay, he said, and didn't push. It was small, but I noticed it, even while refusing to treat it as proof that everything had changed. My younger sister didn't come, but sent a short message wishing us happiness, saying no reply was necessary. During the ceremony, my older sister cried openly in the front row. My quiet sister held her hand, and my father sat beside them. The empty seat where my mother could have been was noticeable, but it didn't swallow the room. My husband squeezed my hand when my voice shook. Nothing dramatic happened. The cake was slightly crooked. The music cut out for a few seconds. A kid dropped a cup during the vows. It wasn't perfect. It was calm. That was enough. A few days after the wedding, the clinic officially offered me the transfer. My husband and I sat at the same table where we'd argued about postponing, and this time looked at the numbers together instead of letting fear decide. Moving would be expensive. We'd lose more of our deposit. He'd have to find a new job. But the new city was far enough for distance, close enough to still visit my sisters. We accepted. It wasn't a magical escape. Our new apartment was smaller. For a few weeks, he had no steady work and took whatever temporary jobs he could find. I was constantly stressed about money and once snapped at him for ordering takeout, then apologized because the real issue was that I was scared. He eventually found a permanent position nearby, and I settled into a new clinic where nobody knew my family history. And the biggest daily crisis was a scheduling mistake. About a year later, a new account with almost no information messaged me, details only my mother would know, saying she had a right to see photos from her own daughter's wedding. I didn't respond. I blocked the account. Later, my younger sister told me she'd started therapy, trying to understand why being rejected by one person had made her feel like she needed to beat me instead of just moving on. She didn't ask me to forgive her or pressure me to reply. I left the message unanswered for weeks, then finally wrote, "I hope therapy helps." That was it. Slowly, we started exchanging occasional messages. A birthday, a holiday, a comment about our quiet sister's new apartment. We didn't become best friends, and trust didn't come rushing back. It came in small pieces. My relationship with my father stayed limited. We talked on important dates, and when he slipped back into old habits, I ended the conversation. There was no big reunion, just a different pattern because for once I was actually enforcing my own boundaries. My older and quiet sisters visited whenever they could. My husband stayed careful around my father and never had contact with my mother again, and I never pushed him to forgive her. People sometimes ask if I feel guilty that my mother missed my wedding. Yes, that's the uncomfortable truth. You can know a boundary is necessary and still feel guilty for creating it. You can love someone and still decide they no longer get unlimited access to you. You can miss the mother you always hoped for while protecting yourself from the one who actually exists. I also feel guilty about pushing my sister, embarrassed that I believed for so long my father would finally stand up for me if I just explained things perfectly, and I regret some of what I said to my husband when I confused his financial caution with him pulling away. I wasn't calm or graceful through most of this. I made mistakes, but eventually I stopped volunteering to be the person who absorbed every family problem to keep everyone else comfortable. For years, my mother taught everyone that my pain could be handled later, while my sister's pain needed immediate attention. My father reinforced it by asking me to accept whatever kept the peace. My younger sister learned that loud enough hurt gets people to gather around it, and I learned to mistake constantly enduring things for being mature. Moving away didn't erase those patterns. Getting married didn't fix them either. The change was smaller and more realistic. Now, when an unknown account messages me, I don't panic before deciding what to do. When my father asks me to reconsider something because my mother is upset, I end the conversation instead of trying to fix it. When my sister tells me she's working on herself, I let her do that without making myself the prize she has to earn. And when my husband asks if I'm okay, I try to actually answer instead of saying I'm fine with the expression of someone secretly planning a life in the woods. We built a life that's ordinary in the best possible way. Bills on the counter, grocery lists, arguments about laundry, phone calls with my sisters, quiet weekends. There's no one dropping to their knees in front of someone else's fiancé. No one waiting outside a workplace parking lot. No constant fear of the next family explosion. Of course, there are still days when I wish the ending had been cleaner. I wish my mother would call from her own phone, take responsibility for what she did, and apologize without adding a single excuse afterward. I wish my father could explain why keeping himself comfortable mattered more than protecting me. I wish my sister could somehow return all the moments when I was expected to give up pieces of myself for the sake of family peace. None of those things have happened. Real life is frustrating that way. It doesn't wrap everything up neatly just because you finally understand what went wrong. All I have is the ability to decide what happens next. And honestly, some days even that feels exhausting. Peace doesn't always look exciting from the outside. Sometimes peace looks like a quiet apartment, a normal weekend, and a boring life. After everything my family put me through, boring feels like a luxury.